Revealed. How a simple text for $50 for baby formula led to an incredible midnight transformation. Sarah stood in the bustling ER, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while her heart raced with the weight of unyielding worry. Another night shift melted into exhaustion, the ache in her feet matched only by the tightening in her chest. Rent was due tomorrow, and there was no way her scant paycheck would stretch. With a new baby crying at home, the pressure felt suffocating. She swallowed hard, thoughts spiraling. The last can of baby formula sat empty on the counter, a cruel reminder of her financial reality. In a moment of sheer desperation, she tapped out a text to her estranged father, a man she hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, Dad, can I borrow $50 for baby formula?" She felt a knot twist in her stomach. Would he even reply? Silence was the more likely answer, a testament to the chasm of their fractured relationship. As the seconds ticked away, panic surged. The room spun as she tried to steady her breathing. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar sound. She hesitated before reading the message, bracing herself for indifference. Instead, it was a revelation that sent shockwaves through her. "I'm sending you the money. I also need to tell you that you've inherited your grandfather's farm." A dilapidated farm? She felt a mix of grief and curiosity. Memories whispered through her mind. Her grandfather's tales lingered like ghosts. The last time she had seen her father, there had been anger. Could she trust this information? With nothing left to lose, she forced herself to drive to the farmhouse. Each mile carved deeper into her childhood misunderstandings and unresolved longing. As she arrived, the sight of the overgrown land choked her with emotion. This place had the remnants of legacy, once vibrant with family. Walking through the creaking door, she was met with the thick scent of dust and forgotten years. In the corner, a dusty box revealed notebooks brimming with her grandfather's tales of farming, of struggle, of resilience. The words soaked into her soul, awakening an ember she thought had long gone cold. Inspired, she imagined rounding up local families, using her nursing skills to offer health workshops and foster community. But as her vision bloomed, whispers of doubt gnawed at her. Longtime residents eyed her with skepticism, their judgments roiling beneath smiles that felt rehearsed. She was just a city girl, they would say, with no place in this rural world. Anxiety tightened its grip, and she wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and the fear of failure. Before she could forge ahead, shadows from her father's past lurked closer. A secret emerged, one that threatened to unravel not just Sarah's mission, but her very sense of belonging. Resistance rolled in like a storm, the scornful looks of those who had never welcomed her stinging like barbs against her ambition. Could she weather this? Would the history she wanted to reclaim turn into chains that bound her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tonight, the community meeting loomed like an unwanted guest. She had to share her vision but was terrified of being embraced or cast out again. As the hour approached, her nerves danced in high tension, fingers trembling, breath uneven, thoughts darting in a dark chorus of doubt. Just then, an unexpected knock at the door rocked her world. Who could it be? The weight of her family's tangled past hung heavily around her shoulders, and as shadows whispered at her back, she felt pinned between hope and despair. Would she find strength in her grandfather's legacy? Or was this all just a mirage ready to shatter? The knock came again, sharper this time, slicing through her swirling thoughts. A cold sweat crept over Sarah as she approached the door, each step laden with both dread and curiosity. Who had arrived unannounced? Opening it revealed a familiar face that should have brought warmth, but instead ignited a mixture of apprehension and nostalgia. "Sarah," her father said, voice laced with hesitance. "Can we talk?" The sight of him stirred the darkness from their past. A tangled web of fractured trust and resentment coiled tightly in her mind. The rush of emotions felt chaotic, but she forced them down, focusing instead on the here and now. "What do you want?" "I came to see how you're doing, and about the farm," he replied, his expression softening, yet shadows lurked around his eyes. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You think it's that easy? Just come by after all this time?" His shoulders sagged, probably equipped with rehearsed apologies, but his presence felt more like an encroaching storm than a comfort. She stepped back, opening the door just enough for him to enter, choosing the tension over confrontation. They moved to the worn kitchen table, a testament to both family and the weight of abandonment. She could still smell the lingering essence of years gone, curling around them like forgotten memories. "I received your message," he said, searching her eyes for a connection she wasn't ready to give. "I took the first step. Is that what you care about? Not that I'm struggling every single day?" "I didn't come to throw stones, Sarah. I want to help. We can fix this," he offered. But his intentions hung uncertainly in the air, as if he were trying to convince himself more than her. "What do you know about fixing things?" The old resentment bubbled hot within her, and she needed to release it. "You've been absent, silent." Her father deferred, his gaze dropping to the table. "I made mistakes. I own that. But I'm here now. I won't leave again." As his words sank in, the familiar ache of her childhood resurfaced, those moments when hope had danced just out of reach. But here lay a different reality. The farm was hers, a gateway to the future she was hoping to build. With a mix of fear and resolve, she asked, "Why now?" "I heard about the changes in the community. It's struggling. You're bringing your nursing skills back home and—" His voice faltered as he looked around, the old photographs clinging to the walls like silent witnesses of their shared history. "And what?" she pressed. "Building it back up. It's all you. I want to help however I can, even if it means admitting I was wrong," he stated, the sincerity in his voice contrasting with the doubt weighing on her heart. She took a deep breath, her mind racing through the possibilities. Could she truly establish the health workshops she envisioned with her father by her side? Would the community, riddled with prejudices against her, ever accept them both? Or might their past be shielded forever? "Trust doesn't come easy," she finally responded, the words hanging heavy. He nodded, accepting responsibility. "I understand." A fragile silence enveloped them. The path ahead was murky, but an undeniable shift had occurred. A glimmering potential between them, albeit buried under years of hurt. The meeting still awaited her presence, a canvas onto which she could start painting the picture of her dreams. She just had to decide if she could truly embrace the journey alongside her father. "Let's start simple," she said, her voice steadier. "Tomorrow, come help me set up for the meeting, one step at a time." "Okay," he agreed, warmth creeping back into his expression. As he left, each footstep across the wooden floor echoed in her chest, forging the beginnings of a new chapter. Whether nurtured or neglected, this chapter would challenge everything she believed about herself, her capabilities, and the bonds of family. What awaited her in the community meeting would shape her fate. Would she rise or fall under the scrutiny of neighbors who had once called her an outsider? She found herself caught between hope and fear, tethered to the fragile thread of possibility. Tomorrow loomed ahead, and with it, the moment she would face her own past while reshaping her future. And as she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the dusty window, she whispered a question that seeped into her soul. Could this truly be the turning point? The dawn cast a muted glow over the kitchen as Sarah prepared for the confrontation that lay ahead. The walls, cloaked in memories and regrets, bore witness to her internal struggle. She ran her fingers over the table, tracing the wooden grain, feeling the weight of each decision pressing down upon her. The workshop was a mere mirage if she couldn't overcome the ghosts of her past. Her father's offer lingered in her mind like a lifebuoy amidst turbulent waters. What would it mean to accept his help? To blend their ideals in this endeavor where her autonomy was at stake? Each scenario replayed, each potential outcome diverging like the many paths before her. After a hasty breakfast, she glanced at her notes, an outline crafted in countless hours while battling self-doubt. The idea of the health workshops took form, a bridge uniting healthcare and community needs. But as she reread her bullet points, a gnawing doubt rose. Was she ready to expose her ambitions to her neighbors, the very people who had labeled her an exile? As she headed toward the community center, uncertainty gnawed at her. Today was about establishing credibility, not just as a healthcare professional, but as a person emerging from the long shadows of mistrust. She envisioned the faces of those from her childhood, skeptical, judgmental, waiting for her to falter. The center itself stood modestly, a structure symbolic of the stagnation that had gripped the town for years. Upon walking through the door, her senses heightened, an electric tension crackling in the air as participants trickled into the room. Each familiar face seemed to bear the weight of history, jeering silently at her as she calculated her opening words. Arranging the chairs into a semicircle felt more than symbolic. It was the foundation of her new initiative, a community offering she dared to propose. Yet the idea of her father entering the room and aligning himself beside her sent a shiver of trepidation through her veins. Trust hung precariously, wavering between her longing for familial support and the fear of betrayal. Moments later, he entered, glancing around at the gathering crowd. Their gazes met. For a split second, he seemed like an old guardian. But this was a new chapter. There was power in vulnerability, and she willed herself to believe it. A small knot of courage unfurled within her as she steadied her breath, determined to reclaim her voice. "Thank you all for coming," Sarah began, her voice slicing through the silence, bold and clear, though her heart drummed furiously against her ribcage. "I know I've been away, but I am here to facilitate change." As she spoke, she felt the undertow of her father's presence. It both comforted and haunted her, an anchor to their shared past, but also a reminder of the betrayal that stemmed from it. She acknowledged her own struggles, speaking of her journey with sincerity, inviting empathy rather than the scorn she feared. Yet, the moment she saw an old neighbor mouthing a harsh whisper, "She's just back for her father's sake," the visceral sting set fire to her resolve. She could surrender to indignation, but that wouldn't pave the way for the workshops. Instead, she paraphrased those very doubts and faced them head-on. "Trust has to be built, and I want to create a space where we can work together. It starts with acknowledging our pain and guiding our community toward healing. But I need your help." As Sarah transitioned into the details of her plan, the initial skepticism began to distort. Her words flowed from a wellspring of passion unknowingly ignited by their judgment. Each moment felt like a revelation. This was about more than health workshops. It was about redefining herself in their community landscape. Before long, hands were raised, questions emerged, and she found herself in a powerful rhythm. Each inquiry forced her to think quickly, to articulate her vision with authenticity, pulling in her father for support whenever tensions emerged. This dialogue, saturated with shared hopes, began constructing a fragile yet growing foundation of trust. Yet, amid the enthusiasm, one question haunted her like a specter. Would it be enough to overcome the years of alienation? As discussions heated into plans for their first workshop, Sarah realized she was standing at a precipice. Either she'd spiral back into the old cycles of distrust, or she'd find a way to break free, using her newfound voice as the guiding force. Was her father's presence a fortitude or a liability? The meeting was merely the beginning of an uncertain journey, one where his shadow loomed large over her ambition. And as she looked around the room, ready to confront both her past and future, a singular thought pushed ahead, resonance echoing within. Could this be the beginning of an unexpected alliance? After a week that felt like an eternity, Sarah found herself drawn back to the community center, her mind a whirl of newfound possibilities and unresolved tensions. The energy from their last meeting buzzed behind her, urging her to keep pushing forward. Yet, each step toward the door felt heavy with expectation and doubt. She was lost in thought, analyzing how she could continue to evolve in her role, when she abruptly halted on the verge of entering. An assortment of faces appeared in her mind. The old neighbor with the withering glance, the uncertainty that had once ruled over her, the raw emotion that lingered after she had spoken her truth. Each memory felt like a test of her resolve, reminding her that she was asking for the community's trust, a precious commodity well squandered in her past. As she stepped inside, today's meeting would focus on strategy, how to effectively launch the first health workshop she had envisioned. But in that moment of anticipation, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if her predatory confidence masked her insecurities? What if she, with all her passion and preparation, was still that girl, forsaken and alone? "Sarah, are you ready?" Her father's voice pulled her from her internal battle. He stood at the front, a mix of encouragement and vulnerability mirrored in his features. "Yeah, I think so," she replied, though uncertainty quivered just beneath her facade. Today she would need to be more than just a figurehead. She needed to embody the leader she aspired to be. Minutes later, as the last few members filtered in, she stood before the small gathering, her palms slightly damp with perspiration. She could hear murmurs of expectation, whispers of apprehension and curiosity. "All right," she began, her tone steady yet searching. "First, I want to thank you all for being here again. We're going to build momentum, and this first workshop is our key." Sarah laid out the objectives: practical exercises, health tips, tailored to their demographics, and inviting guest speakers who would resonate with their experiences. She aimed for relatability, even offering snippets of her own health journey, laying bare the personal battles fought in the quiet of her home. Yet, as the ideas flowed, so too did the skepticism. A voice piped up from the back. "What makes you think we can trust you, Sarah? Nothing ever changes around here." It felt like a punch to the gut. The energy in the room shifted, a palpable tension brewing in the air. For a brief moment, she found herself wanting to defend her intentions, to argue against the weight of history that bore down upon her. But she steadied her breath, recalling the path she had chosen. "I know I've made mistakes, and I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking for a chance to prove we can build something together." Her heart raced as she extended her gaze across the room, lingering on those weathered faces. She could sense the doubt, but she also noticed a flicker of possibility in some eyes. Empowerment shimmered within her. This was no longer just about convincing others. It was about reclaiming her right to be part of this community's evolution. "Let's not forget what binds us," she continued, leaning in. "We all want better health outcomes. We share the same stories, the same struggles. Together, let's challenge the cycle of stagnation head-on." As questions began to flow again, she embraced each inquiry as an opportunity to demonstrate her dedication, her willingness to engage with their concerns honestly. Yet the shadow of her father lingered. Would he remain a pillar, or was he a crutch on which she relied too heavily? When the meeting wrapped up and participants drifted away, Sarah overheard snippets of conversation, her name punctuated with doubts and cautious hope. One voice resonated louder than the rest, deeply curious, inflected with the raw edge of vulnerability. "I wonder what she really believes she can change." Her heart raced, uncertainty swirling as she grasped for assurance. But perhaps, like the workshop itself, this was only the beginning. Daring to confront her past was necessary not just for herself, but for those around her. With the shadows of doubt boxed the corners of her thoughts, she stood alone in the center of an empty room, the echoes of potential change vibrating against the walls. Was she truly capable of forging a new narrative for herself, one that bridged the distrust that had once defined her? As she left the community center, a single thought gripped her. Was her fight for acceptance worth the potential backlash of her father's shadow? The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced along the empty streets. Sarah walked home, each step echoing the uncertainties of her day. The air felt thicker, laden with the weight of her thoughts. She racked her brain for solutions, dissecting her conversation at the meeting and the skepticism that clung to it. A sense of frustration simmered within her. Why was change so often met with resistance? The doubt she faced felt like a familiar cloak, wrapping around her shoulders just as the evening chill settled in. It had become too easy to wear that cloak, to let it shield her from both critique and growth. But not now. Not when she had taken the first bold steps toward transformation. As she pushed open the door of her apartment, the stale air welcomed her like an old friend, though the familiarity struck her as oppressive. She let her bag slump to the floor and moved towards the window, taking deep breaths to fill her lungs with the night's coolness. The city lay sprawled beneath her, each light a flicker of potential. It was a stark contrast to her inner turmoil. Sinking into her favorite chair, Sarah reflected on the evening. What did she want more? Validation from the community? Or to believe in her own vision first? A burning in her chest reminded her that indecision could no longer be an option. She needed to confront the voices that whispered of her inadequacy, while simultaneously inspiring faith in her mission. In that moment, something inside her sparked, a new determination to dissect her past and leverage it for personal growth, not disgrace. She resolved to not just push the workshop forward, but to engage deeply with herself. What led her here? What lessons had she learned that could redefine her approach? She grabbed her notebook and a pen, flipping through the pages filled with ideas, sketches of research, and fragments of her experiences. Her eyes landed on a page about the stigma surrounding health discussions in her community. It hit her then, a crucial facet she hadn't fully explored. Her hesitance was perpetuated by a nagging fear of failure, yet she remembered the faces of the people who had listened to her speak. Their tentative interest ignited a flicker of responsibility within her. So much had to change, but it had to begin with her genuine self. Would her authenticity resonate louder than the whispers of doubt? As she penned out her thoughts and strategies, a sense of clarity washed over her. She would host a small gathering, an informal discussion instead of her workshop. There, they could air their grievances, share their experiences, and expose the layers of misunderstanding that had accumulated over the years. Her goal wasn't merely to instruct, but to listen and learn. But would she find the courage to stand in front of a group once more? Past failures clawed at her confidence. The lingering question hung heavily. Could a simple initiative turn the tide? She closed her notebook and took a deep breath, suddenly aware that something was shifting within her. Taking that leap might come with its share of backlash, but what if she could finally redefine not only her narrative, but also the stories belonging to those around her? The next day, as darkness receded and dawn broke, Sarah felt a sense of urgency. She would need to confront the doubts raised about her capabilities, including those that were self-inflicted. Would she find the strength to invite vulnerability into her public persona while shaking off the lingering doubt? As she stepped outside, the city awakening around her felt electric. With every moment, life was ready to unfold in ways she had never imagined. And with her heart set on this new endeavor, a question loomed larger than ever. Would she truly be able to bridge the gap between past failures and the potential for a brighter future? The sun poured through the living room window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the soft glow. Surrounded by her notes and scraps of paper, Sarah felt unusually calm. Yet beneath that peace, an undercurrent of anxiety stirred, as she prepared to reach out to others. Each page carried the weight of her aspirations, but also the weight of potential judgment. Today was the day she would send out her invitations. She stared at her phone, the screen blank, a canvas for her intentions. Each message would be a silent plea for honesty, both theirs and her own. She questioned the fear a single button could trigger. What if her words failed to resonate, igniting more skepticism rather than sparking conversation? She took a deep breath and began typing. Hey everyone, I'm hosting an informal gathering this weekend. I'd love for anyone interested in discussing the barriers around healthcare to join. Let's share our experiences and learn from each other. The message felt charged with vulnerability. She hesitated, contemplating the response. It would either lead to constructive dialogue or remind her of her previous failures. With a swift movement, she pressed send. Conflicting emotions swirled within her. Would they view her as an authentic seeker of truth or a misguided optimist? Time crawled as she awaited reactions. The hours loomed, their stretch amplifying her insecurities. Could she honestly expect her voice to break through the noise of doubt that often overwhelmed her and the people she hoped to connect with? Late in the afternoon, a response chimed in. It was from an old friend, Jason, who had always encouraged her through thick and thin. Sounds great. I'll be there, he replied earnestly. A flicker of relief ignited inside her. She responded enthusiastically, grateful for at least one ally. By evening, others began confirming attendance. Some were acquaintances, while a few remained unknown, their curiosity piqued by her invitation. Each affirmation felt like a gentle pat on the back, gradually peeling away the layers of apprehension. But a new tension emerged. How would she steer the conversation? As Sarah prepared for the gathering, she dove deep into her past, sifting through moments that had shaped her understanding of health and communication. She recalled a pivotal moment in her childhood when her family struggled to access basic medical care. It was during that time she had developed a voice that was empowered by necessity. The path had been jagged, filled with hurdles and unyielding hurdles, but it had ultimately led her here, trembling yet determined. The day of the gathering arrived, and anticipation coiled around her. She arranged the space meticulously, setting out chairs in a casual manner, as if to invite an organic flow of dialogue rather than a structured presentation. When the doorbell rang, her heart raced. Voices filtered in, and soon the room filled with a diverse group. Strangers shared knowing glances, and old friends embraced like family. It wasn't just her nerves that danced. Their shared apprehensions echoed in the air, a collective tapestry of vulnerability being woven together. Sarah opened the discussion with a personal story, relaying her childhood experience. The room fell silent, the weight of her words creating an almost palpable connection among them. As she spoke, she noticed nods of understanding ripple through the group. A significant shift was beginning to manifest. She was not just talking about her experiences. She was embodying her drive for change. This simple step had already begun bridging the gap, intertwining her narrative with those around her. But as the conversation deepened and the emotional tides turned, Sarah realized she was on the verge of confronting something far more challenging than she had anticipated. Her fears of judgment and inadequacy began re-emerging, threatening to overshadow the inspiring moment. How would she handle the uncharted waters of this dialogue when her doubts clawed for dominance? The stakes felt higher than ever as she braced for an inevitable confrontation with her own insecurities. A confrontation that would either bind them closer or rip her newfound confidence apart. Would she rise to the challenge, or would the shadows of her past threaten to engulf her voice once again? The room hummed with a collective energy that Sarah had never anticipated. As faces turned toward her, their expressions mirrored a mix of curiosity and encouragement. It might have been the first time she was engaging people openly about something so personal, yet she could almost taste the looming apprehension swirling within her. With a shaky exhale, she encouraged others to share their experiences, feeling the pull of dialogue wrap around them, binding the space they occupied. It felt exhilarating and terrifying simultaneously. Each contribution from the group resonated, revealing intricate layers of personal narratives wound within the broader context of healthcare struggles. As they spoke, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the diversity of paths that had led them all to this moment. Yet, beneath the riveting exchange, Sarah's mind drifted sporadically toward her insecurities. Would anyone truly understand the depths of her concerns, the magnitude of her motivations? Despite reassurances from Jason and the enthusiasm of others, self-doubt nipped at her heels. She questioned if she was merely a conduit for their voices, incapable of leading the conversation she had so earnestly sought to foster. The chatter grew stimulating, amalgamating into a fusion of ideas and experiences. But every time someone asked a question, the knot in Sarah's stomach tightened. When would they connect the dots that would unveil their truths? An unsettling whisper echoed in her mind, telling her she might smooth over certain topics, balk in the face of challenging questions, and ultimately diffuse the energy building like a storm front in the room. Jason raised a crucial point related to a recent experience he had with a local clinic, lighting up the group once more. "Isn't it ironic," he said, "that we often feel more like obstacles in the system than patients?" Heads nodded vigorously, but Sarah felt an itch to steer the conversation deeper, to seek solutions instead of lingering in discomfort. How could they collectively transform challenges into meaningful discourse? This unexpected desire to engage in a deeper inquiry thrilled her. She wasn't merely recounting her past anymore. She wanted to drive action. She subtly took charge of the discussion, guiding them to elaborate on what practical changes they could envision in their own experiences. "The real question is," Sarah began, a tremor in her voice betraying her nerves, but also fueling her determination. "How can we harness our shared stories to advocate for change? What if we took this beyond just talking?" It was as if her question unleashed a tidal wave. Participants leaned in, eager to brainstorm ideas, developing community workshops, or maybe even drafting proposals to share with local health services. Sarah felt herself transform. She was no longer the hesitant individual who had sent out a simple text. With each dialogue, she summoned a growing reservoir of courage. Yet just as hope surged, a surge of self-doubt flared again. "But what do I know about advocating? I'm just a person who has been through it," she thought, shoving that nagging voice down. But then again, wasn't her lived experience as valid as any? The vibrant exchange continued, but in her mind's eye, the specter of doubt still loomed ominously. Could she really be a catalyst for change? Or would she collapse into the very fears she sought to conquer? Someone suggested they gather again. The thought sent a bolt of thrill down her spine. This wasn't merely a conversation. It was the genesis of something larger. But just as Sarah soaked in this revelation, a sharp pang of uncertainty lanced through her. What if the next gathering falters? What if I can't lead them through it again? As discussions simmered into a hopeful close, Sarah found her thoughts racing. Could she sustain this momentum even as murmurs of anxiety resurfaced? The night held promise, but it also bore the weight of uncharted territories that demanded confrontation. Her introspection spiraled, unsettled, yet rigid with possibilities. What she had perceived as mere vulnerability had carved pathways to empowerment. The confrontation loomed nearer. Could she confront her own doubts about being enough? Or was this an adventure doomed to failure without a firm grasp on self-acceptance? Maybe, just maybe, the answers awaited her in the essence of the very connection she was starting to forge, where honesty danced with courage like light through her living room window. The next steps were daunting, yet the growing ember of excitement propelled her forward. But at what cost? With the room finally quieting, the echo of shared conviction thrummed through her veins, suggesting a door had opened. What awaited on the other side as she delved deeper into advocacy, armed with her newly found courage? The days following the gathering were a whirlwind for Sarah. The thrill of shared energy lingered, transforming into a palpable anticipation. Each sun-drenched morning felt laden with potential, yet the evenings carved out moments of introspection, that threatened to unravel her newfound resolve. In the solitude of her living room, her gaze often fixated on a prominent whiteboard that now teemed with scribbled ideas, workshop topics, action points, and a tentative roadmap to advocacy that emerged from the collective voices of the previous meeting. The vibrant colors of the markers felt like echoes of the feelings she had amassed: hope and trepidation, excitement and self-doubt. But as she sat down to draft an outline for their next gathering, anxiety crept in, gnawing at her composure. What if the ideas faltered? What if she was unable to translate collective passion into concrete plans? She recalled Jason's animated face as he spoke, yet the memory faded under the weight of her fear. With a deliberate breath, Sarah picked up the pen, determined to channel the nervous energy into structure. How could she build a bridge from their stories to actionable change? Would it be enough to gather, discuss, and brainstorm? Or did they need something more profound? Something that challenged her personally, yet nurtured the group's aspirations? She bit her lip and made a choice: reach out to Jason for advice. He was a fulcrum of energy, a spark that had invigorated their discussion. Siri buzzed her phone's screen with reminders, but all Sarah could think about was that first encounter, the moment she stepped outside her comfort zone. "Mind if we chat?" she texted Jason, heart racing in sync with the sent notification. The reply came swiftly, and they arranged to meet at a coffee shop. On the bike ride over, the rhythmic pedaling felt cathartic, a way to shake off the doubts clinging like fog. Yet as she approached the cafe, nerves resurfaced, coiling in her stomach. Jason greeted her with his characteristic warmth, and they settled into a cozy corner. As they sipped their drinks, Sarah began to open up about her fears of maintaining the momentum from their last discussion. Jason listened, nodding and interjecting with affirming comments. "Sarah, you've already done something remarkable. You brought everyone together, and that's the hardest part," he encouraged. "Use that energy as a foundation. Tackle one issue at a time when you meet again. Start small. Build from there." His perspective resonated, but self-doubt still whispered insidiously. "What if I can't guide them effectively next time? What if my inadequacy shows?" she confessed. "What if you don't? What if you thrive?" he replied, leaning forward, sincerity lighting his eyes. "We can only grow through facing our challenges. Remember, you're not alone in this. Everyone else is feeling the same way. They're looking to you for direction." She mulled over his words, sensing a flicker of something deeper, maybe a thread of openness that could weave through the fabric of her uncertainty. Despite acknowledging her vulnerability, she hesitated to fully embrace the ideal of leading with confidence. Determined to put her fears aside, they spent the next hour brainstorming workshop themes, different approaches to empower participants, and possible partnerships with local organizations. With each idea tossed into the air, the weight of her anxieties began to lighten. As she left the cafe, the path ahead felt clearer. She understood that personal development wasn't a straight line. It meandered, replete with detours and obstacles. Each decision she made to confront her doubts propelled her forward, fostering resilience within. Yet, lurking in the background was the uneasy question: could she truly step into this pivotal role? The mental seesaw of hope and fear stirred as she realized the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. Returning home, she peered once more at the whiteboard, feeling an exhilarating mixture of fear and exhilaration surge. Perhaps it wasn't just about leading a conversation, but demonstrating that vulnerability could become a powerful tool for growth and transformation. Just as revelations began to settle, the phone buzzed again, breaking her contemplative state. An unexpected notice flashed a meeting invitation, a community health summit scheduled for the following month. Sarah's heart raced, each thump echoing her inner conflict. Could she take the leap and represent her group, diving deeper into advocacy? The moment of truth loomed on the horizon, challenging her resolve. What awaited her as she stood on the precipice of a larger world? And would she drown in her fears, or finally discover the leader she was meant to be? The invitation lingered in her mind long after she had set her phone down. A community health summit, a platform to elevate not only her voice, but the collective aspirations of those she had begun to see as collaborators and allies. The thought ignited an intensity she had not anticipated, a powerful mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Days rolled into each other as Sarah meticulously prepared for the summit. Amid the countless hours spent researching, formulating her points, and practicing her delivery, guilt surfaced. Was she neglecting her own needs in pursuit of something so grand? Yet the urgency within her overshadowed any self-serving thoughts. She was on the cusp of embracing something significant. She had to lean into it, not shrink back. Each evening, she found herself revisiting that whiteboard. It had transformed from a mere collection of chaotic thoughts into a tangible manifestation of her journey. Next to her ideas about advocacy and workshops, a new list began to form. The key messages she wanted to share, statistics to ground her proposals, and an action plan that would showcase the potential for real change. The impact of preparation began to shift her self-doubt into a quiet confidence. She was not simply advocating, she was becoming the advocate she aspired to be. However, still entangled in her reflection, one question shadowed her development. Who was she to speak at such an event? With a relentless inner dialogue, she dissected the moments that led her here. There had been obstacles, moments of failure, times when she had felt utterly unprepared. But each of those instances led to learning, navigation through her doubts, and ultimately growth. Realization dawned. Every part of her journey, the whispers of self-doubt, and the suffocating fear had strengthened her resilience. She was no longer merely a participant in conversations. She had become a leader in her own right. A leader who could take her narrative, the raw honesty of her experiences, and infuse it with purpose. As the summit date approached, she continued to refine her presentation, even engaging others in her practice sessions. Friends and new acquaintances alike encouraged her, providing feedback and sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. Sarah became the conduit of reflections, pieces of vulnerability exchanged in a safe space, each storytelling moment fortifying her resolve. Then came the night before the summit, a quiet moment of preparation that turned into wild introspection. The room felt electric with possibilities, yet her heart alternatively sank under the weight of apprehension. What if her voice wavered? What if she lost her train of thought? Then another thought pierced through. What if her message resonated deeply, igniting sparks of change? Stepping to the bathroom mirror, she rehearsed her opening words. With each repetition, she imbued the words with passion, drawing from the silk strands of her life's challenges. But there was a gap she couldn't quite fill, the space between fear and resolution. Just as she settled her nerves, the phone buzzed again, disrupting her meditation. Her heart raced as she noticed a message from Jason. He had sent her a simple note. "Trust yourself. Your story matters." Those words cascaded over her walls of uncertainty, urging her to step boldly into the unknown. Restlessness replaced her calm, driving her to recalibrate her approach. Instead of focusing solely on the content, she shifted her energy toward authentic connection. This was not just about facts and figures, but the human stories behind them, stories that demanded to be shared. As she closed her eyes, envisioning the audience, faces eager to listen, her inner resolve transformed into a roaring determination. Suddenly, it was no longer about fear. It was about impact, the potential to instigate personal and relational growth. The moment was drawing near, weaving threads of anticipation and dread within her. Would she rise to the occasion? Tomorrow would unveil everything, and Sarah knew that she faced not only an opportunity, but the possibility of shedding her fears entirely. Would she emerge as a beacon for others navigating their own uncertainties? Or would self-doubt cloud her judgment when it mattered most? Only time would tell as dawn approached, marking the threshold of her metamorphosis. The summit was just hours away, and Sarah stood at the brink of discovery. As dawn broke, light crept into Sarah's kitchen, illuminating the pages of notes that had become her constant companions during this transformative journey. Today was not merely an event. It was the pivotal moment she had been tirelessly preparing for. She could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest, could feel how far she had come, yet how fragile her resolve still felt. Here, in this familiar space, she paced, rehearsing her talking points, blending statistics with personal stories. She was no longer just the girl who had written a desperate text for baby formula. She was standing on the precipice of something brighter, fueled by resilience and sparked by vulnerability. Thoughts raced about how she would address the community, standing before a crowd eager to hear her voice. With renewed determination, she splashed cold water on her face, dispelling the last remnants of doubt. She needed to remember her narrative, the struggles she had faced, the people she had met, how they had shaped her vision. Each memory added to her growing confidence, intertwining with her desire to carve out a lasting change in the community. Arriving at the summit venue, Sarah's heart sank to the rhythm of the bustling crowd. Conversations intertwined with laughter and hopeful optimism filled the air, sparking an electric energy she hadn't expected. As she took her seat among the panelists, anticipation twisted her stomach. Yet it was a reminder that she was no longer isolated in her experience. She was surrounded by a dynamic tapestry of stories. When her turn to speak approached, Sarah glanced out across the audience. Old acquaintances from the community mixed with new allies. Each face held the imprint of doubt she once lived with, yet now she recognized the glimmers of hope that mirrored her own transformation. This would not be a mere presentation. It was her chance to connect authentically, to give voice to those who had long been unheard. As she stood and stepped forward to the microphone, she felt an exhilarating wave of clarity wash over her. Thank you all for being here. Today I want to share not just statistics about healthcare access, but the story that brought me to this moment, she began. With her voice steady and her heart open, she recounted her journey, from the moment that led to her estranged relationship with her father, to her rekindled connection with the farm, her dreams, and eventually, how health workshops emerged as a beacon of hope within the community. Each word resonated with the audience, and Sarah noticed them leaning in, hanging on her every syllable. The vulnerability she had once viewed as weakness had transformed. It became a bridge for understanding. She spoke of the struggles they all faced, emphasizing how these challenges united them. The room filled with an electric charge, the collective sigh of relief that marked shared understanding. Together, we can foster a community where health and wellness are accessible to everyone, she declared, finishing with a fervor that ignited applause. The room erupted, a symphony of encouragement that swelled in her chest. She felt recognition reconvening. This wasn't just about her, but about all of them reclaiming their stories. As she stepped off the stage, a rush of warmth enveloped her. The fear that had once consumed her began to dissipate, and in its place stood a solid confidence, radiating competence throughout her core. She was no longer a city girl out of place in a rural world. She had established herself, claiming her rightful position within this community she longed to rebuild. In the following weeks, she devoted herself to her vision, organizing health workshops that were well attended, a testament to the budding trust and unity that had begun to spread. She connected with local organizations to ensure resources were available to every attendee. The help her father had offered transformed from a point of contention to a collaborative effort, healing old wounds while forging new paths together. As Sarah reflected on her growth, a profound satisfaction settled in. She had conquered her fears and doubts, emerging not only as a voice for herself, but for others who felt unheard. The chasm that separated her from her own narrative had shrunk, replaced by threads of shared stories now woven into the fabric of her community. Staring out the window one evening, the glow of the sunset painted the sky, a vivid reminder of the change that had unfolded. How far she had come from that desperate text for baby formula. With a smile, she understood the importance of vulnerability as strength, a lesson she would carry forward in every endeavor. Sarah's journey had encapsulated the essence of personal achievement and growth. Her resolve shone brightly, her achievements clear and tangible, leaving behind the fear that used to bind her. She stood as a formidable figure within her community, a beacon of resilience, competence, and genuine belonging. This was her moment, to stand in the light of fulfillment, knowing that she had transformed not just her own experiences, but those of many others. Sarah had emerged victorious, and her story was just beginning. Now it's your turn to be part of this incredible journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.